Hi, Laurie. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon to all the ones that are connect. Thank you for joining in today. My name is Veronica Hernandez, and I'm the CEO for Ogilvy Mexico and Miami. Only to let you know that I've been part of REF since 2018, and I can tell you that it's a very helpful as a leader to have like different advices and point of view of different perspectives and different knowledge from all the members of my forum. I'm in the forum number 4, and very happy with the results and with the members of my forum. REF is an international organization of peer advisory boards for top tier business leaders. Founded 30 years ago in the US, we now have more than 2,100 members in 18 countries. REF creates a space where members can elevate their most strategic challenges in an environment of trust and confidentiality. Well, I am here with Laurie King, Manager Director Experience for Ogilvy Mexico and Miami. And she also is a regional lead in LATAM for data and technology. Just let me give you a brief introduction on Laurie's bios and resume with a huge experience. Um, she became an expert in business transformation through digital technologies and a proven driver and enabler of business growth and operational excellence. She has worked for global multiple brands across different countries and continents. She has recently moved to Mexico from the US, where she was leading the experience business team for IBM. And only to let you know the different countries and continents that she has worked with, she started with a startup actually in 1995. Laurie used to have a startup named Nojo Digital that actually then was acquired by Ogilvy. And then this happened in London, and then she stayed in London working for as Ogilvy interactive director in Ogilvy One Worldwide. Then she moved to Paris as IBM regional director for Europe in Ogilvy One Worldwide. Then, still in Paris, she was the global digital director for Nestle. And then she moved to Cape Town, where she used to be the head of digital for Ogilvy. Then she moved again to London, and she used to be the global business director in J. Walter Thompson. And recently in Paris again as global client lead, program director for Ogilvy Worldwide. And the most recently job was in Vietnam, where she used to be the chief MarTech officer in Ogilvy. And now after Vietnam, she moved to Mexico. But only to give you a very personal data from her and a very good thing to know about Laurie on a more personal way. She was the owner, and it's in Mallorca. She was the owner and manager of a dive center named Gold Star Paddy. And she bought and ran a vocational training scuba dive center in Mallorca. Its goal was to train and qualify new dive professionals in a demanding, fun, and multilingual environment. That's great, Laurie. So you're a diver and a scuba. That's great. And how do I knew Laurie? I've known Laurie for a couple of years back when she was based in Vietnam. But it's only recently that she has been here and running the experience team in Mexico, in Ogilvy, Mexico, alongside, alongside her regional role as head of data and tech. Her background is such a varied mix of expertise and experiences. We are all very excited to have her here, especially a time of great change and potential growth. What's interesting is when Laurie talks about women in tech. That's why we are here. She's talking as somebody who has experience from the perspective of Africa, Europe, Asia, and the US. We have invited Laurie to this fireside chat, an event hosted by REF Women's Network, given theme of the 2023 International Women's Day, DigitALL, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. Welcome, Laurie. Thank you for being here. So let's dive right in. Tell us, why are women the way forward for tech? Or rather, why women can help your bottom line?
Vero, that was quite some introduction. Thank you very, very much. And Ref, thank you very much for hosting me here. It's a privilege to be here. A lot of what I'm going through is from my own personal experiences. I have worked in a lot of different places with a lot of different teams. I'm obviously also, I bring in some data, stuff that I've also read about and learned about. But yes, a lot of this is personal. And before we get started, there's just one thing I wanted to mention. I don't know whether some of you, when you heard the phrase women in tech, were already thinking that, yes, it really would be nice if the world was a fairer place. But in the day-to-day reality of the business, what do women in tech have to do with my company or the success of my company? Yeah, we're all running businesses. We all have a bottom line. We all have targets. So what I'd like to focus on today, within the breadth of my own experience, is how the role of women in tech can and will have a very real impact on your business's bottom line. Globally, there are very good reasons why we need more women in the workforce, and particularly areas where they are underrepresented. And tech actually is a classic example of that. And there are lots of big numbers. I'm quoting here the one from the Harvard Business Review, which calculates that equal representation in the workforce would raise global GDP by between about 3 to 6%. And that in turn would translate to a boost in the global economy of somewhere between 2.5 and $5 trillion.
Wow.
The thing about those sorts of numbers is that not all of us are global economists. And if you're anything like me, then $1 trillion is actually not really, it's impossible to manage. I mean, imagine, it's too big. I find it difficult in the sort of the context of my day-to-day life or business. So in fact, over the next half hour, 40 minutes or so, I'm going to leave the global economy to take good care of itself and focus instead on how women in tech can benefit your business. So a little bit about me. Very's already given a bit of a sort of the biog. I am indeed a woman in tech. But I also feel that in this context, I'm maybe a little bit more than that. I feel like I'm a bit like a time traveler, someone who has worked in a personal past that provides an insight into the future, potentially your future. And the reason why I think I know about your future without even knowing you is that I started out in tech at a point in the past, but one that is more like the near future than any point in between the 90s and now. Times have changed, but I see factors coming flying at us that I recognize, and I know that women are part of the solution to the new challenges that we're facing. Moving on then. Before I tell you why I think women are the answer to the challenges that we see facing us everywhere, and not just in LATAM, but I think globally, let's take a look maybe at why women should or would want to work in tech. So right now, the tech industry is booming, and there are opportunities across the tech landscape for women with all sorts of skill sets. Really, as the tech business grows, so the types of skills and the breadth of skills increases. And I really, really believe now it's one of the most exciting times to be in tech or to start in tech. With the dramatic increase in the use of technology, as with any business, there's an equal increase in the need for skills, both in the hard skills like coding, but also in areas of design development, product design development, implementation, communications, team leadership. Yeah, I mean, when you're running a business, all of these skills come into play, not just the hard ones. And with this increase in the demand for skills and the breadth of skills, there are often competitive salaries to accompany this. Another reason why I think it's a great time, or there's a lot of reasons for going into tech for women, is innovation. Now, when I started, and I will touch on this later, it was all about innovation. But as has often been the case, the tech industry is constantly evolving, it's constantly exploring, it's constantly pushing the limits of what is actually possible and trying. And doesn't mean that it always succeeds. We try, it's not quite right, we try again. And that's how we develop new things and we create new things. And right now, that means we as women have a chance to be part of this reshaping of tech and also defining how that tech is used. And I think that's really important, that women are part of this, that we are part of defining the tech and how that technology is used. One of the most interesting things about tech, I remember talking about this with Vero just the other day, is not just the tech itself, but how we are constantly reshaping how it is used. I was just reading recently about China and the rise of AI and how they're using AI in fish bots that look like fish in the oceans to gather particles of plastic, which I think we probably all know is a real problem. And the fish then, these AI bots, take that plastic away where it can be recycled. That's a really innovative use of technology. And I think we are on the verge, we are on the cusp of a whole slew of new innovations, courtesy of technology and the thinking behind it. As you may have gathered from what Vero was saying, travel has also been a big benefit for me. My role in tech has meant I have been able to go to a lot of incredible places. I did start in the UK, but as Vero said, I've worked in Paris, Cape Town, Spain, Vietnam. Was working for the US more recently, but I was based in Canada. And now I'm here in Mexico, and I have to say I'm loving it. And I see this also as a chance to explore all of LATAM. So for me, and that's a personal reason, that's another incentive or great thing about being in tech. And yet, despite all of this and all of the great reasons, whether it's money, whether it's innovation, whether it's the challenge, we're always hearing that women are woefully underrepresented in the industry. Now, I can think of a few reasons why, but what I'd rather do at the moment is look at why companies should be recruiting women and why they're missing out if they don't. So, what do you miss out on if you don't have women involved in your product development? Product development, like any work stream, has many layers, has many roles, multitude of skills and capabilities that are required. Coding is obviously key, but there are so many more skills needed to make a successful product. My focus at the moment is on the experience design of a product and the technical development that underlies it to make it real. There are lots of arguments about why women bring something different to the product development party. And there are some excellent arguments about how diversity helps with creativity. There's also a lot that is talked about regards women's natural empathy and how they offer a better understanding of likely consumer responses to messages and product offerings. And these are all excellent arguments. But for the moment, I'm going to put them to one side and focus on some real world proven examples of how women can offer something different and valuable. and also why that may go unnoticed. My first real world example is to do with a massive software library called GitHub. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's massive. GitHub allows collaboration with developers from all over the world. And that's actually one really cool thing. It doesn't matter where I go, there are certain tools and software that are used by the tech community that you're familiar with wherever you go. That's great. This one is an open source solution that enables developers to contribute and share their knowledge to benefit the global community. So this is where coders share code and, more importantly, ask for improvements from other coders. A few years ago, when trying to find out more about how code can be made more efficient, GitHub took a closer look at a sample of 3 million agreed improvements. It turned out that when it came to changes proven to make things more efficient, women coders scored higher than men in every one of the top 10 computer languages.
Wow.
In real terms, code efficiency translates directly to quicker lead times, faster testing, which in turn means better products for less time and money invested. It can mean a first to market, which will gain you competitive advantage. It means agility when responding to competitors and consumer needs alike. And so, well done to those women. But there was a problem, or I see it as a problem or a challenge. Where women didn't say they were women, so when they were not identified as women, their fellow coders found them better in all 10 languages. Where women did say they were women, identified themselves as women, their fellow coders, including other women, decided that their code wasn't so good after all. In fact, when code was labeled as being from women, the coding community, including women, felt code by men was better. I find that, I mean, that's astonishing.
Yeah.
So what I wonder is perhaps part of the problem for women in tech is women, not the whole by any means, but certainly there's something here. I think I'll come on it a bit later, but I think suffice it to say, there are legacy attitudes with both men and women. Even women who are good doubt themselves, as I'm sure some men probably would too if they entered an all-female environment where all of the experts were all women. I think sometimes that women in tech may experience imposter syndrome. Perhaps they feel like they are not good enough, or they'll be found out, or they're not good enough to succeed in this world that is largely male dominated. Or maybe they feel like they don't belong, and this lack of confidence can undermine them and often hold them back. And that in turn maybe makes them make different career choices. However, I really genuinely think it would be bad business to let that sort of legacy thinking from men or women get in the way of improving efficiency and delivering a good product to market. And as I say, I only came across this because I was researching for this talk. But I think actually you see a lot of that in every day. I think women do doubt themselves. They do lack self-belief, and especially in an area that is quite male dominated. I do think it's difficult. I have sometimes found it difficult when confronted with an entirely male workforce, especially if I'm supposed to be telling them what to do. It can be daunting. But I think we need to, it's easy to say, how do you get that self-belief? I don't think there are any, magic bullets or magic answers, but I think being aware of it can actually really help.
And you see this, Laurie, worldwide? I mean, you see these kind of things? Oh.
It's really like, in fact, someone just asked me that question exactly today. Like, but is this the same everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it is. And I sort of thought there would be, like Vietnam is a really very one of the most sort of equal countries I've lived and worked in, because of it's quite communist, there is no sense of better woman or better man or whatever. You know, a woman can be in a building site as well as, you know, being a doctor or working as a waitress. It doesn't matter. But even there was only one person on my team who was female. And the real difficulty, though, was actually trying to find women both skilled in that area and with the confidence to get into that area. And in South Africa, only one woman was on my team. And what was good there was that she was actually in a tech. She was programming, and she was damn good as well. She was really, really good. So yes, it's everywhere, I think. In my experience, I mean, if other people have data on other markets, I'd be really interested to find out about it. So yeah, do let me know.
Yeah, and you know, Laurie, maybe as you were saying, maybe women think that it's this, as you were saying, the hard side of tech, but you were mentioning that it's much more than that.
Yeah.
There's communication, there's design development. So maybe it's what do you think it is about it? It's lack of knowledge, or it's lack of what does technology can be much more broader than only
Yeah.
this hard side?
I think I come onto it a bit later, but in fact, I think some of it is that this whole idea of legacy, we have this image of like computer being very male, tech, nerdy, speaking in some strange techie language. Now that tech has become part of our lives, it impacts every aspect of our life, really. The skills needed there are no longer just about hard coding, and that is needed as well. And there are some great women doing that. But team leadership, how on earth do you get a team to all work together with all of their different backgrounds, experiences? Or, you know, you ask one coder about someone else's code, I tell you, they will all have a different point of view about how it should be done differently. One of the skills is trying to get these people together, to work together, to pull together, communicating with the different elements between front, back, QA, whether it's mobile, communicating with the UX designers, understanding. I'm going to stop there because I'm going ahead to what I'm about to say. But it's a really, really valid question. And I will go into detail a bit later.
Okay. Thank you, Laurie.
Another example actually is from a UX designer called Lorenzo Doremi, who tells us about a story about his experience. And I contacted him to check that he was okay if I talked about it. And this is what he was saying. He was saying we had to design and ship a convincing special offer using nice red background. And he was saying they changed the red tonality at least 5 times. In the beginning, he says, I chose a particularly bright red, which was appreciated by most of the male colleagues while being rejected by every woman in the company. They always said it was blinding and basically unusable.
No.
Now, because Lorenzo Doremi is quite thorough and quite geeky, and that's a compliment, as well as a user experience designer, he then checked the color balance and brightness of everyone's screen. And in the process, he also found that all the men there, or the ones he checked, had their computer and phone screens set at a higher level of brightness. So I don't know whether, if anyone's heard that there's a theory that women see tones differently from men. And in fact, there's a theory that this relates to evolution due to the roles of men as hunters needing better perception of movement and women as gatherers needing better tonal vision to choose between edible berries, good, and fatal berries, not so good. And to be honest, I've heard this sort of argument thing many times, and I always thought it sounded like a nice story and nothing more. But I did then find the research that shows that men and women do see color differently. It turns out men do see motion differently, and women have demonstrably finer vision of tonal difference, something I did not know.
Wow.
I know. And what this means is that what this means is that women designers see a page or product literally through different eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the most important thing there is, of course, if they're seeing it through different eyes, so are 50% of your consumers. So a big point there for having women involved. And remember, I mentioned to the guy who he chose this red. The women really hated it. They said it was unusable.
Mm-hmm.
There was a report done by the Aaron Bass Institute for Marketing Science. It's the world's largest centre for research into marketing. It looked at online purchases and found that the majority of purchases by the majority of consumers, whether men or women, took 10 seconds or less. That's 10 seconds. So when you've got just 10 seconds to get someone to make the right decision, i.e. buy your product, I don't think you can afford to have 50% of your market instantly think, sorry, this is unusable, I move on to buy something else. And for me, that's a hard example of why if your consumer base, your customers, 50% of them, and whether it's a bit less or a bit more, are women, you need to be ensuring actually that when you're developing a product, they are part of your product development process.
That's correct.
So that what you're delivering actually is fit for purpose, is what we say in experience design.
Yeah.
So then, sorry, dry throat. So I think without women, if you don't have women in tech and experience design, I think what we're saying is that products and services risk being designed by men for men, which also means that design teams could end up creating products and user experiences that don't work for half their market. And the fact is, it could be that they end up doing this, but they don't know it because they literally cannot see it. I was reading. Sorry, Barry.
No. I think this is a very important, point that we have to know, and that the tech leaders in companies or whatever, they need to know this, as you were saying. If their products and experiences are some products for women, so they need to think that women needs to be on this technology side from their company, right? Because they're thinking, they're looking, as you were saying, actually we see the colors different. So I think that's important to know. And maybe it's again, maybe lack of knowledge about these kind of things.
I think there is a lot of that. I'll come on to it, but the challenge for women in tech is there's just not one. It is manifold. There are many reasons, but there is change. There is change. I will come on to that. There is hope.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know.
So I was reading a book by Caroline Criado Perez about invisible women, and she was saying, and I do think this is true, the result of this deeply male-dominated culture is that the male experience, or the male perspective, has come to be seen as universal, while the female experience, and that of half the global population, after all, is seen as niche, really, as sort of a special small part.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about women in tech here, but I don't think it's just technology. I'm obviously, but I think that probably happens in other industries as well. But certainly, I think we see it a lot in tech.
What's the name of the book again?
Yes, it's called Invisible Women.
Invisible Women. Okay.
Yeah, Caroline Criado Perez, and I thought that was really. It's amazing that the point of view of half the population can be seen as niche. It's it's true, but it's crazy. And to this point and I was talking about the fact that products going to market and then just not hitting the right spot. You could be missing 50% of your audience could be going elsewhere. You may think it's unlikely that, I don't think it's unlikely because I've seen it happen, but you could think it's unlikely that products would be released into the marketplace without taking women into consideration. But in 2015, Apple first released its HealthKit app. an app that tracked your blood alcohol, your sodium levels, inhaler use, I mean, everything. As the software exec, Apple software exec Craig Federighi put it, with help, you can monitor all of your metrics that you're most interested in. Unless you happen to be a human who menstruates, is pregnant, or hopes to be, because this breakthrough app forgot to include any menstrual tracking. And I bet actually a whole load of people didn't even know that. I didn't know it until I researched it. It's astonishing that you could have release something into the marketplace aimed at the broad population, obviously into their health, and not cover off something like menstrual tracking. I mean, it has obviously been rectified, but amazing. And I think that's another very hard example of what happens if you do not have women with whatever skill sets involved in your product development, the design, the implementation, or whatever of that.
Definitely. Actually, I was the other day that they gave us another talk about this equality thing at the agency. They were telling us also that when some cars, they were looking for the technology in cars, the seats and everything. They were thinking only on the body of the man, not in the body of the women's, that they're really different. So all the seats and everything, all the technology, all the things, the features of the cars were thinked based in the man's body and everything.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's not just tech, but in manufacturing, in engineering, there is also really underrepresentation of women. As I say, my focus is tech, but it is definitely in other industries as well, and it can be really costly. Yeah, it can be really, really costly mistakes to be making, having to go back to the drawing board and redo it because you didn't take into consideration half your consumer base.
That's right.
So I think it's not just about us all wanting to make the world a fairer place. It is about actually having a real impact on the bottom line of your business.
That's right.
So if women are key to tech that works, I wanted to move on to where are we when it comes to women in tech? And there's good news and there's not so good news. I'll start as one always does with the not so good news. While it varies around the world, the domination of male software developers is really, really quite startling. It really is. As I say, like in all the teams that I've had, max has been one, except, and I'm not just saying this, in the team I have right now. It's still small, but it's at around 27%, which is way bigger than anywhere else I've been. One analysis by Statista last year suggested that men made up over 90% of software developers globally. And we all know men don't make up 90% of the population or the consumer base. So the risk of the male experience being taken as the only experience becomes particularly high. And as we were just saying, can come at a high cost.
Yeah.
So we were talking about hardcore tech, like coding, but even away from that, the story isn't much better. A Workplace Trends report called Women in Tech took a look at the USA and found that only 26% of all computing-related jobs are held by women. And incidentally, if you look at Hispanic women, they accounted for just 2% of computer-related jobs. This is in the US, though.
Wow.
So the thing is, so you were asking before, Vera, about why, and is this about knowledge? We all know computers have changed. I mean, dramatically. In the 60s and 70s, computers took up a whole room. I think it was someone from IBM who said, we'll only ever need one computer. And now everyone's got a computer. When I was at school, the computers didn't take up an entire room, but they were still locked away in a computer room, a special room that was obviously held by the former teacher. Mr. Hammond was the name of our teacher. But now everyone listening to this has a cloud-based computer in their pocket. Our everyday experience makes it obvious that tech is always on and always with us, all of us. So why do we still expect the tech specialists to look the same way as they did when computers were locked away in a room and used almost exclusively by men? Because that GitHub example earlier suggests that even women coders, good ones, still secretly harbour the idea that you need to be male to be the real deal in tech. And I think that's a real challenge. I think men and women of you know, some generations still have this idea, but I do think there's hope, and I'm coming on to it. So
do you think, Laurie, it's this because they are not hiring women, or because women aren't applying?
well, I have some interesting stats, Vero, that I will come on to, and that's the positive change that we're seeing. And it is good news for the future of tech. Let me just start a bit back with the basics. According to the Inter-American Development Bank, software development, and I think that covers everything around it, will be the fastest growing career in Latin America over the next decade, with 1.2 million professionals needed by 2025. That's astonishing.
Wow.
And also that it's LATAM is brilliant. BizDev is a corporate tech solution and recruitment company, a very large recruitment company. And they point to figures showing LATAM as having the fastest IT industry growth of any region in the world. It's projected to grow at 5.3% through the 2020s, compared to just 3.3% globally.
LATAM.
Yeah, I mean, it's LATAM, you know. I'm pleased I'm here, Vero. Yeah, I'm pleased I came over from the US to Mexico. It's starting to look good. It doesn't mean it's all smooth running. Anyone familiar with LATAM will have seen a lot of press around startup layoffs in LATAM last year. But remember, I mentioned I feel like a time traveler. That's part of the benefit of being a time traveler. I was there the first round of tech startups in the 1990s. We had our own .com startup that was bought by Ogilvy. But I saw, after all the hype, I saw a lot of companies fall by the wayside. But it didn't stop the growth of technology that we see with us today. So I've seen the bubbles, and I'm familiar with the factors of overhyping and the bad business models. But I think we've moved through that, and I've learned a bit about the nature of markets and the underlying demand for talent, and the continued and increasing demand for talent. And there really is an increase in this area for a wide variety of skills. To give you some more numbers, Brazil's software market is expected to reach the milestone figure of $6 billion USD by 2026. And in 2021, Mexican IT companies generated revenue worth 60 billion, 8% up from 2020, mainly from product development, which is an area that I do a lot of focus on, and IT service providers, and that can be infrastructure or server-side or cloud infrastructure. In that same year, the Mexican startup scene alone generated 3.38 billion. I hadn't realized that Mexico had such a great startup culture. And I think one of the things about startup culture, in order to be part of that, I think you have to be quite open, and you have to be really open to new ideas, new ways of thinking. And in that, I think open to, hey, whoever's good at this, whether they're male, female, or whatever, let's bring them in. Let's have them, because we need, we can't afford to be narrow in our thinking if we're in a startup environment. So I do think that is helping and will continue to help. So Mexico's IT outsourcing industry has been growing by 10 to 15% yearly. And this actually is because the impact of tech growth goes beyond LATAM. One of the key drivers of that growth is nearshore outsourcing from the USA. And the USA accounts for approximately 60% of Argentina's outsourcing services. And I think Mexico is really growing right up there.
Yeah.
And this is about, I'm just coming to the point you made earlier. There are the obvious powerhouses like Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, but there are other countries that are topping the tables in tech, sometimes in unexpected ways, like Uruguay. So where do you think Uruguay tops the tech table? I will tell you. It is in the number of women applying for tech roles. And that also is part of the conundrum. Like why aren't there many, so many women in tech? A lot of women aren't applying for it. Yeah. And I think that also comes back to this whole legacy thinking. It's a male dominated area. I think it comes back to education. But yeah, so Uruguay topping the tables and the number of women applying. I think that's great. And because LATAM is at the forefront of a revolution in the making, and it's a revolution that's about women in tech. And I think that I think I've got some data somewhere else, basically saying LATAM is leading the way. LATAM still sees men dominating in tech jobs, with fewer than 10% of software developers in Latin America being women. But I think, like the data I've seen, and that's not exhaustive, there are really powerful signs that things are actually starting to change.
Well, that's good. That's good to know. That's good to know that we are on the right path.
Exactly, and it's happening in spots all over. In all LATAM markets in different areas, it's starting to happen, and we will reach a tipping point. I think. I mentioned Bear Devs, who the recruiter as well. They have a report on women in tech and studied around 7 million tech applications. Yes, this was the data I was looking for. 7 million tech applications, and found the region with the highest growth in women applying for tech positions was in LATAM. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant for women in Latin America, and it's brilliant for business in Latin America.
Now what we need is that they hire them, and that the upper management it's okay with that, right?
In fact, actually, and I don't have the data here, but some of the thinking is potentially, if you think about tech as just being coding, which is quite narrow. I did read, and I don't have the data to hand, but that women start in coding or in QA, but because they tend to be very good at communication, like strong communication skills, strong management skills, actually often they are promoted out. Now, I don't have the hard data on that at the moment, but I just remember reading it. And that is one. It could be also the way that we identify women in tech needs to change as well. It's not just about the coding, as I've been saying. It's about the management skills, the communication skills, the motivation skills. It's all of those. But certainly I do think in some countries they are implementing a sort of proactive approach to employing women, and that has to cover off not just junior levels, but quotas for levels of seniority throughout the company. Otherwise, you could just say, yeah, we've got 100% women, but they're all on the reception. So yes, that is something that needs to be considered, so that we don't just end up with a junior female workforce.
Yeah. Also to have this in the upper management, right? It's important to
Well, I am an example of that.
Yeah, definitely. We need more Lauries.
With AI, who knows what's possible? In fact, so LATAM has shown an increase of women applying for tech roles of over 400% in just over 5 years. And I know that the stats people among you will say that this is partly because you get a big percentage change when coming from a small base. But there's no denying that this is a huge change. And I think that, in my opinion, I think that's also one of the most exciting features of growth for LATAM. It's if it carries on this path, it's going to become a global tech hub in all of those flavors of tech. I don't just mean hard coding. So in all of those, and it will really, really impact business growth, financial growth.
Yeah.
And what's happening in LATAM is different, and that difference, I think, is really, really important. When talking about the growth of LATAM the growth of the LATAM tech economy and outsourcing roles, commentators usually focus on the quality of education, and examples like the drive by Chile to popularize computer science with technological skills being included in the national curriculum. And of course, this is a factor, and it comes back very to what you were saying about, is it knowledge? Yeah. If do people know about all of the things that all of the roles that there are within the tech sector? And I do think that's one, but it's not the only one. What's harder to spot, because it doesn't fit necessarily with our traditional legacy understanding of tech skills, is the idea that LATAM is powering up precisely because LATAM isn't powered by legacy approaches to tech. LATAM has actually taken a bit of a different route. I mean, one of the reasons why you brought me over here from the US was because of the potential that there is here. And it doesn't take long, I don't think, to see that there is a different culture around tech in LATAM, and one that makes it far more relevant to women and vice versa. So I was thinking about this and discussing it with some friends, like, why is it different? Why do we think it might be more appealing to women? And I was researching, and I also found other people with the same argument, like tech, LATAM, why is it more interesting for women? There was one woman in particular, Courtney McColgan of a software company, Runa, and she wrote in the Mexico Business News, in the US, and this is where LATAM is different, in the US, consumers went from owning a traditional phone at home to getting their first cell phone, then getting a personal computer, and then moving to a smartphone. The majority of consumers in Latin America went straight from a traditional phone to a smartphone. So they skipped a whole bit. This actually is what's given the region one of the highest and fastest growing smartphone penetration rates in emerging markets, because actually a similar thing, not to the same extent, I also saw happening in Africa. And skipping steps has really helped Latin America to grow quite rapidly, making it an attractive market in which to build technology products. And skipping steps is not just a shortcut, but because in the process it leaves behind, when you skip, you leave behind old thinking. Yeah, the computer room, men always in tech, all of that way of thinking. And it can help actually wipe the slate clean of old attitudes and attitudes that hold people back. And I think this is also comes back to the questions you were asking about why.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, there's not just one reason, there's many.
Yeah. And Laurie, in the US, what can you tell us in the US about these trends in if there's less women in tech or more? What do you think in the US is different?
So my experience with the US, I was only there for a year. My experience with the US was a lot of the creative side of this was more balanced. It's in experience design. I don't actually have the numbers, but I seem to work pretty evenly with men and with women, maybe more with women actually in terms of the UX development. But my experience was all of that. The tech part of it was offshored to India, and that was very male dominated. So
In India,
yeah. So onshore with the US, I don't have that much experience, except around the more creative side of product design. And there, I think actually there were a lot more women. At least
we can say that they're a step forward than Latina.
Well, Latina seems to be the growth seems to be, from the data I've seen, that more women, there's been a huge percentage growth in the number of women of actually applying for jobs.
Okay.
And that's like the starting point. Well, it's not the starting point. I suppose the education behind it is the starting point. But for getting women into your business, if you've got more women applying, that's going to really, really help. But I think here, like on the team I have, they're not just in the creative, they are also in QA and they're in dev. So there's a broader mix in the team that I actually have here in Mexico. So yeah, it's changing. Recruiters are seeing a surge in women getting into tech, and I don't have precise data on all of the why. Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole lot of data out there. I don't have it, but what I've observed is that the next generation, or the current generation of women, don't feel excluded from the world of tech, and that's one of the reasons maybe why they're applying for more jobs in that space. And they're not feeling excluded because they've grown up with it. They're surrounded by it. We all do. We're surrounded by it. We play with it. We learn. We buy with it. We manage our lives with it. And the new generation, they haven't grown up with a computer room, that's owned by the male teacher. We tech is all around us. And LATAM skipping straight to smartphones means that women are now truly native in this tech world and judge tech products and services on their own terms, with their own thought processes and their own way of looking at the world. Tech is not something to be locked up in the computer room as it used to be when I was growing up. It's become universal. And I'm hoping that, there's a generation of women now that don't feel they have to have a degree in machine learning, machine learning coding skills to be in tech. Tech is now already in part of their lives. And so in many, many diverse ways, and they realize they can be a part of it.
That's right.
I think, I'll come on to it later, but then I think the hiring and the recruitment part, also managers looking to recruit, also maybe have to change the way that that they do that. As I said, you're now no longer just looking for coders, you're looking for all of those other skill sets that mean you're getting a product from the beginning right through it successfully through to launch in the market.
That's right. Laura, we have 6 minutes left.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it went really fast. So if our audience doesn't have any questions, I just want to ask you 2 questions. What advice would you give to women who want to go into tech?
I think like anything, know yourself, know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Don't be afraid to do things you haven't done before. I find I'm constantly having to do things I haven't done before. And sometimes I find that difficult and challenging, but actually it's part of what I love about being in this industry. That's another thing. Constantly learn and upskill. This industry is changing so much and so quickly and so fast. You constantly have to be learning, and I love that about this. That's a really, so I think definitely don't be afraid to do things you haven't done before. Constantly learn and upskill. Network. Meet as many people as you can. You don't know when you're going to meet the next amazing solution architect, or your next boss, or your next startup, or your next mentor. Find your own role models. I didn't know, well, I found out recently, Ada Lovelace was the first computer programmer, not the first female programmer, but the first ever computer programmer, male or female. So find role models, and they're not sometimes so easy to find in this industry, but I think it's great to have someone that you can look to. I think those would be my key points.
Great advices, Laurie. Well, actually, you are not a technologist or have the background we might expect of one. How do you become a woman in tech?
Yeah, sort of by accident. I did Russian at university, which doesn't seem to have a lot to do with what I'm doing now. And I think actually because of what I was saying, I ended up in a sort of hothouse startup that was trying new things, and because it was all new, they didn't know what skills were needed. It was part of an experimental venture into multimedia by the BBC, and I had no idea, and ended up just doing the most crazy stuff. We made it all up. I remember, trying to find out about compression algorithms. There was no one to ask. We simply making it up as we went along back then. And it went from there. And actually, Ogilvy really helped push me in that direction. That's how I ended up in Vietnam with leading a team of developers, a job I'd never done before, a team of developers, language I didn't understand, completely new continent. It was amazing. And along the way, I didn't always stick to the same path as I think you mentioned. I took time out. We bought and set up a dive center. It was like a hobby that sort of got out of control. I spent a couple of years doing that. That really helped with a lot of the social media side of things and understanding how that all works. And the training, taking someone from an intern up to master diver training was also really helps your communication, your team skills. So there's a lot that sort of fed into what I am today. And it hasn't just been, I didn't do a degree in computer science or machine learning.
Okay.
I sort of ended here by accident. So yes.
Just one quick question they're doing me, Laurie. We have only 2 minutes before we say goodbye to everyone. What would be your advice or takeaway to CEOs or upper management on bringing women into the tech fold? What can they do now to change this? If you can be briefly on the answer, that will be great because we have
Okay. I think one of the problems we're dealing with here, especially if CEOs, C-level are interested in this, I don't necessarily think we're dealing with sexism. I think we're dealing with legacy attitudes. And I think we're dealing unconscious bias. I think that C-level and recruitment, head of recruitment, need to be really open to looking for women across the different work streams that are involved in product development. And it's the reason I got into it. Multimedia, as it was called then. It wasn't because I had skills in that. It was actually my personality, my curiosity, a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with traditional technical skills. So I think that they need to start thinking outside of the traditional way of hiring and looking. The spark that you need may not always be someone who's gone through the traditional path of doing a computer science degree. They may come from a great many different other places. So I think being really open to that is really important.
Perfect, Laurie. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your data, advices. I think we have a huge opportunity there to grow the technology business with women, all the things that you gave us. I think there's a lot of things of knowledge, of education, right? So thank you, Laurie, very much for your time. Thank you all the ones that were connected. Thank you, Ref, again for the invitation. And whatever you need, we'll leave our data here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.